Welcome to the 22nd part of our series. Today we are giving a completely new definition of the unified electrons, our universal matter-spirit quanta on the level of membranes of our quantum spectrum. Till now, we have discussed our new paradigm from the theoretical point of view, and we have combined all theoretically possible matter-spirit quanta into the quantum spectrum presented here. We have discussed mainly the cosmic quanta building the cosmic hierarchy. But now we have to start with the elementary particles, the elementary building blocks of our universe. As we have assumed at the very beginning of our presentation of the unified physics, those elementary building pieces of our universe are the universal matter-spirit quanta on the level of membranes of the quantum spectrum. We have considered them previously as having their form of tori. Every single matter-spirit quantum was assumed to form a torus. However, the mathematical topology says that it is an unnecessary complication when we define our elementary building blocks with a hole inside of the torus. When we are going to describe two-dimensional energy and two-dimensional time correlated with every single quantum, it is much simpler to consider another possible form of the quantum. The simplest possible construction from a quantized two-dimensional membrane is to allow the membrane to fold itself into spherical bubbles, without any hole at all. According to this new consideration, we have to abandon this previous, almost traditionally chosen view on our universal quanta, and replace each torus with a spherical bubble of our universal quantum membrane. We have to imagine such a spherical bubble as a soap bubble. And each of our fundamental spheres contains the two-dimensional energy in exactly the same way as a soap bubble contains the material of soap water solution on its surface. The quantum energy is not contained inside of the quantum sphere but on the surface of the bubble. Also all other physical properties, as the quantum period or quantum circulation, but also, if necessary, its mass and other dynamic or even electrodynamic properties, have all to be connected with the surface, and not with the volume of the spherical quantum bubble. A quantum is carrying its energy, but not containing energy inside of the sphere. So, we see here evidently that each matter-spirit quantum is a carrier of its own energy. In our new paradigm description of the universe we don't need any additional carriers of energy, like the traditional photons. By the way, as pointed out previously, in our unified physics there is impossible to define any massless objects or particles, like the traditional photons. When we are going to describe all physical properties of such a spherical matter-spirit quantum, we can use our unified family, and all its values and units. On the universal level of membranes, as assumed, every quantum has its action J equal to the Planck constant, and its electric charge Q equal to the experimentally observed value of this charge, but practically usable only in its squared form. Practically it means that we define our new unified electrons as given in this table. The electron size of about 5 nanometers is the fourth root from the Planck constant. The corresponding quantum period is of about 2/10 of a picosecond, which correspond to frequency of about 5 terahertz. The mass of our unified electron is about 5.5 times larger than the traditionally accepted mass of an electron. However, I remember in 70s or early 80s of the recent century exactly such higher mass of an electron as R1 has been measured by an Australian team of scientists. But their result has been ignored, probably because it did not correlate with the mainstream of the traditional physics of that time. The quantum electric conductivity sigma is also a material-independent constant of nature. The quantum energy can be simply calculated by multiplication of the Planck constant with quantum frequency. and the magnetic momentum μ is given as an example of the additional electromagnetic properties of our unified electron. But it can be usable only in specific technical or technological considerations, but not in general description of nature being discussed in our series. If someone wished to compare by oneself our unified units of physical quantities with the international system of such units, the supporting relations of units are given on the right side of the table. As we remember, we can abandon all vector quantities from our general unified description of the universe, and we can consider our unified electrons just as bubbles of elementary energy. When we are trying to construct many such bubbles from our universal membrane, we could maybe think about such a fully filled plane of the universal quanta with slightly higher energy positioned above the membrane, and simultaneously about a corresponding layer of such quanta with slightly lower energy positioned just below the universal membrane. However, it is not a realistic picture of the situation, of creation of the unified electrons. Rather we have to think about some virtual membrane, without above and below, on which we have to suppose spontaneously and sporadically emerging universal matter-spirit quanta with slightly higher and slightly lower energy, emerging side by side. Such a membrane can be imagined as the region of our atmospheric tropopause, where the physical conditions actually correspond to the universal values of temperature, of about -30 degrees Celsius, and pressure, of about 260 hectopascal. It is possible that the larger and smaller quanta are accidentally next to each other so that the larger quanta can just consume, the smaller quanta. Their energy and size will grow and they will form the fundamentals for the new emerging quanta of the living matter. They will live as long as the energy transfer to them will continue. And they will die, when the energy transfer will be interrupted for time relatively long in comparison with their quantum period. In that case the living quanta, or organisms, will disintegrate back into the unified electrons again. At the same time, it is also possible that several of the lower energy quanta will meet together building the fundamentals for the inanimate dust particles, the same from which our cosmic hierarchy has been formed. On the other side, we have discussed the opacity or transparency of our atmosphere for the different parts of the energetic, traditionally considered as electromagnetic, spectrum. We have seen that the traditional physics cannot explain which 1 mm large particles should be existing in our atmosphere, which should be responsible for the total opacity of the atmosphere for the quantum frequencies between 10 to 11 to 10 to 13 Hz, between the two transparency windows, the optical window and the radio window. Our solution of this mysterium is our proposal to locate the atmospheric shield of life exactly in that range of the energetic spectrum. In our unified description there are exactly the universal quanta of the unified electrons, with their size between 4 and 12 nanometer, protecting the life below the tropopause against the harmful extraterrestrial cosmic radiation. In that way, we understand now what does it mean, when thunder lightnings are connecting the tropopause with the Earth's surface. It is just the delivery of energy, from the universal level of membranes to the higher developed forms of life on Earth. In summary, it is the first ever explanation, why our universal matter-spirit quanta on the level of membranes can be called and thought of as the unified electrons. In the next step we have to build from those electrons all other matter-spirit quanta of our universe. On one side, we have to understand in which way the molecules, the atoms, the atomic nuclei, and quarks, can emerge from the unified electrons, and from them the cosmic dust, galaxies, and supercluster of galaxies. On the other side we have to understand, how the conglomeration of the living fundamental units of those electrons can build all levels of the living quanta, from tissue quanta to superbrain quanta, and from them all living organisms inhabiting Earth over the recent 3.5 milliard years. How all that could be done practically, is the most important scientific task for your young generation in the next years and decades. Next week we will discuss our new definition of our soul, our body, our mind, and individual and global consciousness. So, please join me once again. Bye bye.